She was slowly suffocating, and doctors couldn't explain why. Her CT scan showed both lungs covered with strange white patches, yet every test for pneumonia came back negative. Just 3 weeks earlier, she had bought a humidifier because she wanted to breathe better while she slept. Every night, she filled it with water, switched it on beside her bed, and fell asleep, believing she was protecting her health. Instead, with every breath she took, something invisible was triggering her own immune system to attack her lungs. By the time one specialist finally discovered what was happening, her oxygen levels had dropped so low that even walking a few steps left her gasping for air. How could a device designed to help people breathe end up making her lungs fail? This is Hidden Pathogens.
This is Hidden Pathogens?
The woman fighting for every breath was Barkan, a healthy marketing manager from Colorado. The strange part was that nothing about her life suggested this should have happened. She was only 32 years old. She had never smoked. She exercised several times a week, had no history of asthma, and had never been hospitalized for a serious lung condition. Until just a few weeks earlier, breathing had been something she never had to think about. Now, every breath felt like work. Doctors kept asking the same questions. Have you traveled recently? No. Have you been around anyone who was sick? No. Do you work around chemicals or dust? Again, the answer was no. Everything about her pointed away from a serious lung disease. Like millions of Americans during the winter, she had simply been trying to make her home more comfortable. The dry air had been leaving her with a scratchy throat every morning, so she bought a small ultrasonic humidifier for her bedroom. It promised quieter sleep, relief from dry air, and easier breathing. It quickly became part of her nightly routine. Before going to bed, she filled the tank with tap water, placed it back on the base, watched the cool mist drift across the room, switched off the lights, and fell asleep, believing she was doing something good for her health. She never questioned it. Why would she? The humidifier looked clean. The water looked clear. There was no strange smell, no warning, no sign that anything dangerous was floating through the air she breathed for 8 hours every night. As her condition continued to worsen, doctors searched for hidden infections, autoimmune diseases, and rare lung disorders. None of the answers fit. The real cause wasn't inside her body. It was still sitting quietly on her nightstand. At first, Megan convinced herself she was coming down with a cold. The cough was dry and occasional. She felt more tired than usual, but it was winter, and everyone around her seemed to be fighting off something. She wasn't running a fever. She wasn't coughing up mucus. Nothing about her symptoms seemed serious enough to worry about. So she kept following the same routine. Every night, she filled the humidifier with fresh tap water, placed it beside her bed, and let the cool mist drift through the room until morning. Then the exhaustion became impossible to ignore. Simple chores that had never bothered her suddenly felt overwhelming. Carrying groceries from the car left her stopping to catch her breath. Climbing a single flight of stairs made her heart race. Even talking for too long left her pausing between sentences to inhale. Something was clearly wrong. Her family doctor suspected bronchitis and prescribed medication, reassuring her that she should start feeling better within a few days. Instead, the opposite happened. The cough became more persistent. The shortness of breath spread from moments of activity to moments of rest. Every morning, she woke up feeling like she hadn't taken a full breath all night. The medications weren't working. If anything, she was getting worse. That was the first clue this wasn't an ordinary respiratory infection. Somewhere, something was continuing to injure her lungs. The question was, what? Here's what happens inside Megan's body every night. While Megan slept peacefully each night, another world was waking up. Inside the humidifier's water tank, tiny microorganisms had begun multiplying. The combination of standing water, mineral deposits from tap water, and days without thorough cleaning had created an environment they could thrive in. The humidifier looked perfectly clean from the outside. Inside was a different story. Every time Megan switched it on, the ultrasonic plate vibrated at incredibly high frequencies. Those vibrations didn't just turn water into a cool mist. They also carried microscopic particles from the tank into the air. They were completely invisible. As Megan slept, she breathed in thousands of these microscopic droplets, hour after hour, night after night. They traveled deep into her lungs, reaching the tiny air sacs called alveoli, where oxygen normally passes into the bloodstream. Her immune system immediately recognized that something didn't belong. Specialized immune cells rushed to the area, releasing powerful chemical signals to destroy the foreign material. But instead of a single invasion that quickly ended, the exposure happened again the next night, and the next, and the next. Her immune system never had a chance to calm down. With every night she used the humidifier, more immune cells flooded her lungs. The delicate walls of the alveoli became swollen and inflamed, making it harder for oxygen to pass into her blood. Megan couldn't feel this battle taking place. She only noticed that climbing stairs became harder, that walking across a room left her winded, that each morning she woke up feeling just a little worse than the day before. By the time she finally sought medical help, the damage had been building silently for weeks. The doctors were about to discover inflamed lungs. What they didn't know yet was what had triggered her immune system to attack them. By the time Megan returned to her doctor, even simple conversations left her short of breath. Her cough had become more persistent. The exhaustion was overwhelming, and every breath felt as though she could never quite fill her lungs. The doctor listened carefully with a stethoscope. There were faint crackling sounds deep inside both lungs. A chest X-ray was ordered immediately. When the images appeared on the screen, everyone in the room reached the same conclusion. It looked like pneumonia. The cloudy white patches scattered throughout her lungs were exactly what doctors often see with a serious lung infection. She was prescribed a stronger course of antibiotics and told to go home, rest, and return if her breathing became worse. It seemed like a reasonable diagnosis. After all, pneumonia is far more common than the condition Megan actually had. But as the days passed, something didn't make sense. The antibiotics weren't helping. The cough wasn't improving. Her breathing became even more labored. Instead of recovering, Megan was deteriorating. To her doctors, it looked as if the pneumonia was refusing to respond to treatment. The X-ray showed pneumonia. The symptoms looked like pneumonia. The treatment was for pneumonia. So why was Megan getting worse instead of better? 4 days later, Megan's condition took a frightening turn. She woke up exhausted. Not the kind of exhaustion that disappears after a cup of coffee, but the kind that made simply sitting up in bed feel like hard work. She tried walking to the bathroom. Halfway there, she had to stop. She couldn't catch her breath. Panicked, she checked her smartwatch. Her heart rate was racing, even though she had barely moved. Something was terribly wrong. Her husband rushed her to the emergency room. The moment the triage nurse placed a pulse oximeter on Megan's finger, the room became noticeably more urgent. Her oxygen level was dangerously low. Within minutes, nurses placed her on supplemental oxygen while doctors ordered emergency blood tests and a high-resolution CT scan of her lungs. The images were far worse than anyone expected. Instead of one isolated infection, both lungs were filled with widespread patches of inflammation. They looked severely injured, but not in the way doctors usually see with bacterial pneumonia. Then the laboratory results came back. Blood cultures were negative. Tests for influenza, COVID, RSV, and other common respiratory infections were all negative. Nothing pointed to a virus. Nothing pointed to bacteria. Yet Megan's lungs continued to fail. The medical team realized they were no longer treating a routine case of pneumonia. They were dealing with something far more unusual. But if an infection wasn't destroying her lungs, then what was? Megan was admitted to the hospital that same day. For the next 48 hours, specialists came and went. each studying the same scans, the same blood tests, and the same puzzling symptoms. Everything pointed toward severe inflammation. Nothing pointed toward an infection. The antibiotics were stopped. Doctors began considering diseases that were far less common. Could it be an autoimmune disorder? A rare form of lung disease? A hidden environmental exposure? More blood tests were ordered. Every one of them came back either normal or inconclusive. The mystery only deepened. Then a pulmonologist walked into Megan's room and did something different. Instead of staring at the CT scan, he pulled up a chair. He wanted to know how Megan lived. "Tell me about your home." She described her apartment. "No pets. Any recent water damage or mold?" "No." "Any new hobbies? Woodworking? Painting? Gardening?" She shook her head. Then he paused before asking one final question. "Has anything changed in your home over the last month?" Megan thought about it for a moment. Then she remembered. "I bought a humidifier." The doctor didn't say another word. Instead, he asked the question that would change the entire investigation. "Can you tell me exactly how you use it?" Before we continue, if you're fascinated by real medical mysteries like this, share this video and subscribe to this channel. And you value these videos, there's a free link in the description and pinned comment that helps support the channel. Every bit of click helps us continue researching and telling these stories, and it's completely free. Now, let's continue. Megan explained that she had bought the humidifier a few weeks earlier to make the dry winter air easier to tolerate. Every night before bed, she filled the tank with ordinary tap water. She admitted she hadn't cleaned it very often. "It still looked clean," she said. "I didn't think it needed it." The pulmonologist nodded. He had heard that answer before. He explained that the danger wasn't always something you could see. Inside some humidifiers, especially when tap water is used and the tank isn't cleaned regularly, bacteria, mold, and other microscopic contaminants can begin to grow. Even when the water looks perfectly clear, a thin layer of biofilm can form on the inside surfaces of the tank. Then comes the part most people never realize. Ultrasonic humidifiers don't simply release clean water vapor. They can aerosolize tiny droplets from the water itself. If that water contains microorganisms, mold fragments, or other particles, those microscopic droplets can be carried into the air and breathed deep into the lungs. Suddenly, Megan's illness began to make sense. Not because doctors had found an infection, but because they had found something capable of provoking her immune system every single night while she slept. There was only one way to know if the humidifier was truly responsible. Would the tests confirm the doctor's suspicion, or send the investigation back to the beginning? To prove the humidifier was responsible, the doctors needed more than a suspicion. They ordered a procedure called a bronchoscopy. A thin, flexible camera was guided deep into Megan's airways, allowing doctors to collect fluid from the smallest branches of her lungs. The goal wasn't just to look for bacteria. It was to discover how her lungs were responding. The results finally solved the mystery. There was no overwhelming bacterial infection, no aggressive virus, no hidden pneumonia. Instead, her lungs were filled with immune cells that had been activated over and over again by something she had been breathing. The diagnosis was hypersensitivity pneumonitis, often called humidifier lung, when contaminated humidifiers are the source. The pulmonologist explained it in simple terms. Megan's immune system had done exactly what it was designed to do. Every night, it detected microscopic particles entering her lungs and treated them like dangerous invaders. White blood cells rushed into the tiny air sacs, releasing chemicals to fight the perceived threat. But because the exposure happened again the next night, and the next, and the next, the immune response never switched off. Instead of protecting her lungs, it began damaging them. The swollen air sacs could no longer transfer oxygen into her bloodstream efficiently. That was why walking across a room left her gasping for air. It also explained why antibiotics had completely failed. There had never been a bacterial pneumonia to cure. The real enemy wasn't a germ attacking Megan's lungs. It was Megan's own immune system. The diagnosis finally answered what was happening, but one terrifying question still remained. Had the damage already become permanent? The first order from the pulmonologist was immediate. Stop using the humidifier. Megan's husband went home that afternoon, unplugged it, emptied the tank, and sealed it in a plastic bag so it could be examined later. For the first time in weeks, Megan would spend the night without breathing in whatever had been coming from the machine. But removing the humidifier wasn't enough. The inflammation inside her lungs had become too severe. Doctors started Megan on high-dose corticosteroids to calm her immune system before it caused even more damage. She remained in the hospital on supplemental oxygen, while nurses closely monitored her oxygen levels around the clock. The first 24 hours were the hardest. Every trip to the bathroom left her exhausted. Even speaking for more than a minute forced her to stop and catch her breath. No one knew whether her lungs would begin to recover or whether the inflammation had already crossed the point of no return. Then, several days later, something changed. Her oxygen levels stopped falling. The coughing became less frequent. For the first time since arriving at the hospital, Megan told her doctor she felt like she could finally take a deeper breath. It was only a small improvement. But after weeks of getting worse, it was the first sign that they were finally treating the right disease. Still, the doctors remained cautious. Improvement didn't necessarily mean recovery. Would Megan's lungs heal completely, or had weeks of inflammation left scars that would stay with her for the rest of her life? Over the next several days, Megan continued to improve. The coughing became less frequent. Her oxygen levels slowly climbed. For the first time in weeks, she could walk down the hospital hallway without feeling like she was suffocating. It was the news she had been praying for. But her pulmonologist wasn't celebrating just yet. He explained that hypersensitivity pneumonitis can have two very different endings. If the condition is recognized early and the source of exposure is removed, the lungs can recover remarkably well. But if the inflammation continues for too long, it can leave behind permanent scar tissue. Unlike inflammation, scar tissue doesn't heal. It permanently stiffens the lungs, making it harder for oxygen to pass into the bloodstream. That's why doctors had acted so aggressively. They weren't just trying to help Megan breathe today. They were trying to prevent her from needing oxygen for the rest of her life. A few days later, another CT scan was performed. The images were compared side by side with the ones taken when Megan first arrived. The difference was unmistakable. Much of the inflammation had begun to disappear. Her lungs were finally healing. Megan was eventually discharged from the hospital with instructions to avoid using the humidifier until it had been properly inspected or replaced, complete her medications, and return for regular follow-up appointments to make sure the inflammation didn't return. She was going home. But one question still lingered in everyone's mind. How had a product sold to help people breathe almost left Megan unable to breathe at all? Several weeks after leaving the hospital, Megan returned for another follow-up appointment. This time, she walked into the clinic without stopping to catch her breath. Her oxygen levels had returned to normal. A repeat CT scan showed that most of the inflammation had resolved, confirming that her lungs were recovering. Her pulmonologist told her that recognizing the problem when they did had likely prevented permanent scarring. Then he shared something that surprised her. Megan's case wasn't unique. Many people assume the cool mist coming from a humidifier is nothing more than clean water. But if the tank isn't cleaned regularly, microorganisms can grow inside. In some cases, particularly with ultrasonic humidifiers, microscopic droplets containing those contaminants can become airborne and be inhaled deep into the lungs. The risk isn't the humidifier itself, it's how it's maintained. Using distilled or demineralized water instead of tap water, emptying and drying the tank every day, and cleaning it according to the manufacturer's instructions can greatly reduce the chance of contamination. Megan had done what millions of people do. She bought a product designed to improve her health. She never imagined that one overlooked step in her nightly routine could nearly cost her the ability to breathe. But there was still one final question. What is the one lesson from Megan's story that every humidifier owner should remember before turning one on tonight? A few months after leaving the hospital, Megan finally returned to her normal life. She could climb stairs without stopping. She could walk through the neighborhood without feeling her chest tighten. For the first time in months, breathing was effortless again. It was something she had never appreciated until she almost lost it. The humidifier that had once sat quietly on her nightstand was gone. Not because humidifiers are inherently dangerous, but because Megan now understood that even products designed to improve our health can become harmful when they're used the wrong way or maintained improperly. The most frightening part of her story wasn't how sick she became, it was how ordinary everything seemed. She wasn't climbing a mountain. She wasn't handling toxic chemicals. She wasn't doing anything most people would consider risky. She was simply trying to sleep more comfortably. Tonight, millions of humidifiers will quietly fill bedrooms across the country with cool mist. Most of them will do exactly what they were designed to do. But Megan's story is a reminder that clean-looking water isn't always clean, and a spotless-looking tank isn't always safe. Sometimes the greatest medical mysteries don't begin with rare diseases or dangerous places. Sometimes they begin with an everyday habit, sitting silently on a nightstand, only a few feet from where someone closes their eyes and takes their very first breath. The question isn't whether a humidifier can help you breathe. It's whether you're making sure the air it creates is as safe as you believe it is. Today, she finally could breathe again. But now she understood something she wished she'd known the day she brought that humidifier home. Sometimes the most dangerous threats aren't the ones you can see. They're the ones you breathe without ever noticing. If you made it all the way to the end, thank you. These stories take a lot of research to put together. If you'd like to support the channel, you'll find a free link in the description and pinned comment. Checking it out helps support future videos, and every click allows us to keep bringing these cases to the channel. Also, it's completely free. And if you learned something from this case, like, share, and subscribe for more real medical stories. And if you chose not to subscribe, leave a comment and tell me what would make these videos better. I read far more comments than you might think. This is Hidden Pathogens. I'll see you in the next video. Good night.
This is Hidden Pathogens?